What if Spider-Man was in Demon Slayer? What would the friendly neighborhood hero do in the brutal world of Oni hunters? Could Peter Parker save Rengoku or develop a cure for Nezuko even before the final events? And most importantly, as a hero who refuses to kill, how would he deal with creatures that can only be neutralized by decapitation? Well, before we find out if the spider sense surpasses the transparent world, I need you to shoot that web at the subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss any trips through the multiverse. Our story begins during an intense battle of the Sinister Six in New York. The villain Spot, when his portals are overloaded by an experimental generator, creates an unstable rift. Peter, trying to save civilians, is sucked into the vortex. He doesn't fall in Queens but plummets into the middle of a dark, dense forest full of webs. Yes, destiny. With its ironic sense of humor, fate throws Spider-Man straight into Mount Natagumo. Peter lands with his agility but soon realizes something is wrong. The smell of blood is strong. He spots a boy with Hanafuda earrings being thrown around by threads much sharper than his own. It was Tanjiro Kamado fighting against Rui, lower rank 5. Seeing Rui about to slice Tanjiro, Peter's instincts kick in. The spider sense is more than just a warning in this universe. It acts as if it were a heightened premonition of danger. While the hunters need extreme concentration to see the flow of blood and muscles, Peter senses the intent of the attack even before it begins. With a precise web shot, he pins Rui's threads against the trees, saving Tanjiro at the last second. Rui, irritated, tries to cut Peter. But notice the brutal difference in the scale of physical power here. Spider-Man is capable of holding train cars and lifting buildings. Whole buildings, feats that surpass the brute physical strength of most demons, except maybe the physically strongest upper moons. When Rui tries to pull his threads, Peter simply doesn't move, planted on the ground like a rock. With a violent pull, it's Rui who flies toward Peter, receiving a double kick to the chest that breaks all the demon's ribs, sending him flying meters away. Tanjiro is stunned. He smells Peter. He's not a demon. He's not a slayer. Is it someone with the scent of a human spider? But now the problem arises. Peter traps Rui in a cocoon of nearly indestructible web. He turns to Tanjiro and says, "Hey kid, call the police." That pale kid needs a cell. Tanjiro, confused, tries to explain that he needs to cut off the Oni's head. Because if he doesn't, Rui's bloodlust will never end and he will break free to claim more victims. But Peter refuses, and that moral hesitation almost proves costly. Rui frees himself by using his blood demon art to cut his own flesh and escape from the webs. And Giyu Tomioka arrives at that exact moment. Unlike the original storyline, Giyu sees a man in a red bodysuit arguing with a demon. Without hesitation, Giyu decapitates Rui. Peter is horrified. To him, Giyu has just murdered a child. The ideological conflict is immediate as Giyu turns to attack Peter, who shoots webs from his hands and moves like a spider. It's to be expected that the hunter mistakes him for the spider demon. The battle is interrupted by Tanjiro telling Giyu that Spider-Man carried out the rescue. Peter, confused, wants information, so he is taken to the Demon Slayer core. That's where the situation gets tense. The Hashiras don't know what to do with him. Shinobu Kochi, however, is fascinated, not by his spider powers but by Peter's mind when she talks to him. She realizes that Peter's knowledge of chemistry and biology is centuries ahead of the Taisho era. When Peter discovers that the Onis were humans infected by the blood of Muzan, the king of the Onis, his goal changes. He won't hunt Onis, he will cure them. So, will Peter be able to accomplish such a feat? Look, Peter makes a deal with Ubuyashiki. He will help contain the threats without killing. Meanwhile, he uses the resources of the Butterfly Mansion to study the blood of the Onis. The combination of Peter Parker's genius, the one who has an IQ above 250 with Shinobu's knowledge of poisons, and later, Tamayo's knowledge of biology. A scientific dream team is created that accelerates the discovery of a cure by years. This team was only formed thanks to Tanjiro, who warned about the Oni who has been conducting research on his blood for centuries. Something that makes Kaguya recruit Tamayo long before the events of the Infinity Castle and the Hashira training. Mainly because of Tamayo's advanced research with the help of Shinobu, Peter develops special web fluid, a mixture of synthetic polymers with a high concentration of wisteria. Now his webs don't just trap, they burn and paralyze the Onis on contact. acting like a non-lethal but incapacitating acid. Something similar was shown by Shinobu in the original storyline. In the fight against Duma, the Upper Moon 2, where she used poison, that made the Upper Moon's movements slow. Soon, we arrive at the Mugen train arc, where Rengoku, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, Inosuke, and now Spider-Man board the train. When Enmu puts everyone to sleep, something interesting happens. Peter's spider sense is so in sync with danger that it wakes up Peter's body before his mind. It's an autonomous reflex. Peter wakes up from the dream in a violent impulse, snatching the ticket from the conductor's hand before the spell can fully take hold of him. When the hunters set out to face Enmu, when Tanjiro fights with Inosuke on the roof of the train, Peter does what he does best: damage control, helping Rengoku save the passengers on the train. And of course, when the train derails, Peter uses all his webs to hold the cars together, creating a giant web between the trees and preventing the train from violently overturning. No passenger is seriously injured. A classic superhero movie scene, but in feudal Japan. Then Akaza appears. Upper Moon 3 senses Rengoku's presence, but his eyes soon fix on Peter. Akaza doesn't sense murderous intent in the hero, unlike Rengoku. Ready to fight with all his strength, even to put an end to Akaza. In this battle, the power scale is tested. Akaza is a master of martial arts. But Spider-Man has the way of the spider, a fighting style based on improvisation, superhuman agility, and use of the environment. Akaza tries to use a destructive style, but Spider Sense allows Peter to dodge just millimeters before impact. It's the first time Akaza fights someone who predicts his moves with 100% accuracy without even needing to see. The house gets excited and shouts, "You're strong! Become an Oni, Spider-Man!" But Peter replies that he'd rather keep paying his rent late than become an Oni. He shoots Wisteria webs into Akaza's eyes. The Wisteria poison in the webs irritates Akaza's skin, preventing the instant regeneration of his eyes. Rengoku takes advantage of the opening to use the ninth form. But Akaza is adaptable thanks to his compass. It realizes that Peter doesn't counterattack to kill, so the house focuses its lethal blows on Rengoku. When Akaza delivers the fatal blow that would pierce through Kyojuro's chest, Peter throws himself in front. But remember, Peter has already been run over by trains and beaten up by beings like Rhino and Green Goblin. His durability is insane. Akaza's fist breaks Peter's ribs and punctures his lung, but it doesn't go all the way through. Just like it did with Rengoku's human flesh. Peter holds Akaza's arm inside his own chest, spitting blood from behind the mask with Akaza trapped. Rengoku has his chance to decapitate him, but as we know, the Oni manages to survive even without a head, tearing off his own arms in panic and fleeing into the forest, running like a coward. Rengoku survives, but Peter is seriously injured. However, his healing factor, although not as fast as the Onis or Wolverines, still works. It's much superior to that of a normal human, allowing him to stabilize himself with total concentration breathing, which Tanjiro taught on the train. Rengoku lives, and the core gains new respect for the red and blue demon. Rengoku's survival changes everything. He trains Tanjiro directly, since young Kamado wants to become stronger. But the biggest change happens behind the scenes. Peter, now recovered, realizes that brute strength won't defeat Muzan. He needs the cure. Peter gives it to Tamayo, a sample of his own radioactive blood. Tamayo discovers that the radiation in Peter's blood can be used to destroy Muzan's cells at a molecular level, preventing regeneration, without instantly killing the human host. This would be the key to the reversal. In the entertainment district, Peter's presence trivializes the search. He releases spider trackers throughout the city. Within minutes, he locates Daki. Then her brother appears after Tengen decapitates the Oni, something that would enrage Peter. The fight against Yutaro would be deadly because of the poison, but Peter designed a new suit using the fibers from the hunters' uniforms, making it resistant to light cuts. Against Gyutaro, Peter uses his superior speed to immobilize the blood sickles with his webs. He doesn't cut off the head, but immobilizes Gyutaro. Enough time for Tengen Uzui to decapitate the Oni. Uzui doesn't lose his hand and doesn't retire. The golden age of the Hashiras remains intact. Although Peter wants to save the Oni siblings, he still doesn't have the cure. Tamayo and Shinobu are playing an important role in analyzing the best possibilities to create such a cure against the Aoni. But notice that Muzan, Furious with the failures and intrigued by this Spider-Man decides to take action. He discovers the location of the Swordsmith village, not by accident, but because he wants Peter Parker's head. He sees Peter as a genetic anomaly that could be the key to conquering the sun. The invasion of the Swordsmith village is brutal. Gyoko and Rantengo attack, but Peter is there working on a device to disperse his cure on a large scale, while Tamayo and Shinobu are creating it. Unfortunately, Tanjiro and Nezuko wouldn't be in the village precisely because Tanjiro didn't damage his sword in the fight against Gyutaro. Not needing a new sword, Bultiro takes care of Rantengo's clones, and when Zohakuten finally appears and Peter arrives, he swings between the dragons, as if he were in the skyscrapers of Manhattan. His physical strength allows him to rip off the dragons' heads with his own hands. When Mitsuri arrives at the battle, she is impressed, thinking about how Peter is stronger and more flexible than she is. With Spider-Man distracting Zohakuten, Mitsuri finds the original clone of Rantengo and eliminates it. While Peter protects the village alongside Tiro and Mitsuri, they encounter Gyoko, and exterminating the Oni is much easier. But the real threat appears when Muzan sends Kokushibo to make sure the job gets done. Muzan wants to turn Spider-Man into one of his demons to capture him and use his cells in an attempt to survive under the sun. Unfortunately, the battle against Upper Moon 1 is the greatest challenge for the hunters, especially without the mark awakened by Tanjiro. The fighters will have a very hard time in this fight, including Spider-Man. Moon breathing creates chaotic shockwaves. Peter's spider sense screams so much that it gives him a headache. Peter can't dodge everything. He gets sliced multiple times, his suit is destroyed. But Peter has something that Kokushibo doesn't understand: stubbornness. Peter is clever and sharp. He uses the environment to give himself an advantage. He knocks down the main tower of the village onto Kokushibo, not to kill him, but to buy time. He realizes he can't win with the sword. Even with two allies at his side, he needs to inject the cure. Peter created modified web shooters that fire hypodermic darts with Tamayo's cure, which was still in the experimental phase. It was all or nothing. He had to take the risk, and he also just needed a clear shot. Mutsuro Tokito, covered in blood, and Mitsuri Kanoji, exhausted, try to create an opening. Kokushibo notices their intention and prepares a circular slash to decapitate everyone at once. But Peter, with his spider sense, saves the others from the sweep, and he still manages to find the perfect moment to fire the dart, which has an immediate effect on Kokushibo. Tamayo's experimental cure mixed with Peter's bioengineering doesn't just attack the cells. It overloads the nervous system. Kokushibo drops his sword for the first time in centuries. Muzan's voice in his head is silenced. Mishikatsu Tsugikuni falls to his knees, gasping, looking at his own hands, which slowly lose their claws. He doesn't die, but he's neutralized, falling unconscious as his body tries to fight against centuries of mutation. The silence in the Swordsmith village is deafening. The Hashiras look at Peter, no longer as a warrior, but as a symbol of hope. He didn't need to decapitate. He defeated the strongest creature below Muzan. Awareness and hope that the cure would work. The return to the core is marked by a significant change. Mishikatsu is taken to the Butterfly Mansion. Tamayo, while analyzing the blood of the former Upper Moon 1 who was subjected to Peter's cure, finds the missing link. The ultimate cure is not just about destroying the cells, but about rewriting the original human DNA to reject Muzan's influence. With this discovery, the cure for Nezuko. It is completed and administered immediately. Nezuko wakes up as a human with memories and speech days before the final battle. Muzan lost his grail to conquer the sun. The demon's fear turns into pure hatred. He no longer wants to absorb anyone. He wants total annihilation. He knows that the source of this threat is Spider-Man. The final battle is about to happen. Muzan is desperate and furious. He leads the remaining demons in a direct attack on the mansion. Ueshiki at nightfall. But the core is ready. Peter equipped all the hunters not just with swords, but with small wisteria web bombs. When Muzan breaks through the gates, he is met not with fear, but with a containment strategy. Yomei, Sanemi, Sanemigyu, and the other Hashiras attack in sync, but this time, they are not fighting to kill. They fight to corner him. The cunning Muzan leads them to his fortress, the Infinity Castle, separating them, but without many of his upper moons. The battle in the castle is easier. Rengoku, Gyu, and Tanjiro defeat Akasa, or rather Hakuji, because they managed to inject the cure into the Oni, thanks to Tanjiro, who awakened the transparent world and the Slayer mark. Shinobu's battle against Duma is also extremely quick. With reinforcements from Yomei and Tengen, Nakime is defeated by Muturu, Mitsuru, and Obanai. While the battles in the Infinity Castle are happening in the midst of all this, Peter is fighting Muzan directly as the King of Demons uses his blade whips at hypersonic speed, destroying everything around. Even with his superhuman speed, Peter wouldn't be able to keep up with Muzan if he wasn't wearing his improvised iron spider suit. Made with metal alloys from Nichiren swords and advanced technology, the mechanical legs on Peter's back allow him to move and keep up with Muzan's whip. As the castle collapses, everyone joins together against Muzan. Equipped with Wisteria bombs, Spider-Man is able to get close enough to inject the cure into the King of Demons so that Muzan will remain trapped and suffer for the rest of his life, sentenced to pay for all his crimes. But the outcome is worse than we expected. The radiation from the cure mixed with Spider-Man's blood in the body of the primordial Oni makes him age 9,000 years. With that, after losing his Oni biology and reaching the age of the oldest man to ever walk the earth, Muzan's body turns to dust and fades away. With Muzan's death, the curse ends. The Onis around the world fall. Days later, the core is disbanded and everyone goes on to live their lives happily. Thanks to the help of the Avengers and Doctor Strange, Peter manages to return home. As he swings back to the skyscrapers of New York, Peter thinks, demons are murals. And I used to think John Jonah Jameson was a nightmare. What if Hulk was in Demon Slayer? What would this green monster change in the story of Demon Slayer? When we talk about Hulk, we're talking about a completely absurd character. Hulk's powers in the comics have no limits. He is able to survive even after being completely decapitated and torn apart. He can regenerate almost instantly whenever he wants. But it's not just his regenerative powers that are amazing. His destructive power is as well. Basically, as Hulk gets angrier. In other words, as his rage increases, his powers also increase. But does this power, will it be enough to defeat Muzan Kibutsuji, the king of the Onis? Although he is considered a hero, Hulk often loses control and needs to be stopped by his own friends. In other words, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and even the X-Men. In the World War Hulk arc, after being exiled by the group of heroes called the Illuminati, Hulk returns to Earth seeking revenge and ends up defeating several heroes. And I'm talking about the most powerful ones like Sentry, Cyclops, Colossus, Wolverine, among many others. So would Hulk lose control in the Kimetsu universe? And would he turn against the Oni hunters? There are many questions with several very interesting answers. Hulk's presence will make a huge impact on the story of Demon Slayer. So how did Hulk end up in Demon Slayer? Hulk was fighting alongside the Avengers against Thanos, who used the Infinity Stones to send Hulk across dimensions, taking him to the universe of Demon Slayer. Hulk falls in the middle of the battle between Akaza and Rengoku. Both stop their duel with Hulk's arrival. Rengoku thinks Hulk is another Oni sent by Muzan. After all, being brutally giant and green in a world where only beings with different appearances are Onis, Kyojuro Rengoku immediately goes after Hulk. But his sword is immediately broken by Hulk's tough skin. We should note that there are very few weapons that can hurt Hulk, not just weapons, but the materials themselves from which they are made. So common materials like sunstone, which are used to make Nichiren swords, have no effect on Hulk with just one blow. Hulk sends Rengoku flying and knocks him out. Akaza starts to take an interest in Hulk, seeing him as a worthy opponent for its battle. However, not recognizing him as an Oni. So in order to fight Hulk, it goes after the green monster, but its attacks don't even tickle Hulk. Its speed, however. Although it's impressive for the Oni hunters, it's not that impressive for Hulk, who has already been able to rival both heroes and villains. With hypersonic speed like Sentry and Thor, his blows would be able to strike Akaza and obliterate the Oni's body. However, the Oni would continue to regenerate. After all, only a decapitation done by a Nichiren blade would be able to exterminate the Oni. The battle drags on, but Akaza can't stop Hulk. and he is held until sunrise, meeting his end. Hulk, heading toward the frightened and battle-ready hunters, transforms into Bruce Banner, his human form. We must remember that Hulk is not just Hulk. Even though he suppresses many of Banner's traits, Hulk still has the scientist's consciousness. After Rengoku wakes up from the supposedly light blow given by Hulk, the hunters go with Banner to the Demon Slayer Corps, where Banner discusses with the Hashiras and Ubuyashiki a way to return to his universe and help in the fight against Thanos. He gets the answer that it is possible to return to his universe through the power of Oni, which Muzan knows about. Remember that Banner is a very intelligent scientist. Right after learning all the details and rules to defeat the Onis, Banner would be more alert in his next fight against the Onis, when he volunteers to go to the entertainment district with Uzui and the others after Gyutaro appears. Hulk would appear in front of Uzui to protect him from the Oni's ruthless blood poisons. Here, Hulk would give great support to Tengen in this battle. Hulk could easily handle both Onis. Easily, but Tanjiro's squad would be the ones to deal with Daki, while Hulk helps Tengen defend himself from Gyutaro's ruthless blood attacks. In the end, the two Onis are defeated with ease. But Tanjiro didn't awaken his Demon Slayer mark. That's precisely because he didn't meet the conditions to awaken it in the fight against Gyutaro. So, will this ever happen at some point? Look, Tanjiro also damaged his sword in the fight against Daki upper rank 6. Besides that, Hulk would need weapons that could defeat the demons, so both of them would head to the Swordsmith village in his human form. Banner would do what Hulk can't, create and build. That's why, with the materials available in the current era, with the help of the swordsmiths, he would make an armor and a giant sword using the Sunstone, so that in his other form he would be able to defeat any demon. When Tanjiro and Banner talk about his transformation, including the interesting case of Nezuko, the demon who manages to resist Muzan's control, suddenly the village is attacked. Banner quickly transforms into Hulk and puts on his armor. Meanwhile, Muichiro arrives and decapitates Hantengu. That's when Rantango's clones appear, forcing out the one from the fourth. When the Joy clone launches a powerful blast at Hulk, he doesn't move at all, and quickly with his fists he crushes the Oni. The claws of the Brazil clone can't even scratch Hulk, and he is also crushed by him. The lightning from the Rage clone doesn't have any effect on the green monster either. The spear of the Sadness clone, it is broken by Hulk's tough skin. The clones are easily crushed by Hulk, one after another, with the situation apparently under control. After Tanjiro and Banner decapitate the clones crushed by Hulk, he, with a giant leap, runs toward Multiro, who was fighting against Gyoko upper rank 5. Gyoko tries in every way to destroy Hulk, launching spikes at the hero which do not pierce his skin, even trying to poison Hulk through his skin with the poison from his destroyed fish, but nothing works. Hulk grabs Gyoko and forcefully rips the Oni's head from his body, being sliced by Multiro, returning to Tanjiro and the others. Zoraku Zohakuten had appeared and was launching his powerful attacks against the hunters. If you think the wooden dragons would be able to put pressure on Hulk, you're completely mistaken. Hulk has already been able to crack entire continents with his roar of rage, and his punches are capable of destabilizing the crust of an entire planet. He would obliterate all of Zoroa's dragons and Zohakuten all by himself, and easily. Hulk's power level is beyond that of the upper moons. When Tanjiro finally finds the original clone of Rantango and decapitates him, Nezuko becomes resistant to the sun, and Muzan goes to the Demon Slayer's mansion to absorb her and become the perfect Oni. When Muzan arrives at the Demon Slayer's headquarters, he sends all the Slayers to the Infinity Castle, including Hulk, in order to finish everything once and for all, with the Demon Slayer Corps. However, Muzan can observe his demons, and through this, he knows what Hulk is capable of. Therefore, he, along with his two strongest upper moons and the two remaining elite members, faces Hulk head-on. Muzan's goal is to absorb him and also obtain his power. With an epic battle taking place, Kokushibo has his armor broken just by trying to strike Hulk's body. Doma, the upper moon too. He can't even keep Hulk frozen. His cryokinetic attacks are practically useless. Muzan's blows, even in his most powerful form, aren't able to scratch Hulk. When the King of the Oni shapes his body into a giant mouth to swallow and absorb Hulk, even when he manages to surround Hulk, the Oni can't merge with the green monster, unable to absorb him, and is expelled from Hulk's body when the Hashiras exterminate Nakimi. The Infinity Castle falls apart, placing them in a completely open area. This makes Muzan fear the presence of the sun and try to escape from Hulk. But he doesn't let Muzan escape, and even trying to decapitate him with his giant Nichirin, Muzan can only be exterminated by sunlight. Soon he grabs Muzan's body and turning his body into a ball of flesh, throws him into the sky with all his strength, making the King of the Onis reach a point where the sunlight can hit his body, exterminating him completely. Muzan and his Onis are also exterminated. In the end, the Avengers manage to bring Hulk back to his universe after Thanos' defeat. And this story ends here. What if Ghost Rider was in Demon Slayer? What will the spirit of vengeance do to Muzan and his Onis? Ghost Rider is an entity with absurd power that can subdue even cosmic entities. He is capable of rivaling Galactus, the devourer of worlds in the Marvel Universe. Obviously, that wouldn't be necessary. He wouldn't need to use all of his most insane powers to defeat Muzan and his Onis. However, among his powers is the Penance Stare. That's what will make big changes in the story. Because with this power, Ghost Rider is able to make his victims feel and relive all the pain and suffering they cause to others. He can completely destroy the target's mind. This is an ability that is only ineffective against those who don't have souls or against some beings protected by divine magic, and even those who don't feel guilt or remorse for their actions. So, like the Onis, or rather the Upper Moons and Muzan, they would react to the Penance Stare from Ghost Rider. In fact, will Ghost Rider use the Penance Stare on the Demon Slayers? That's because Ghost Rider is an entity that seeks to punish the guilty and protect the innocent. However, the Hashiras and the Demon Slayers in general, they have already killed many souls tormented by Muzan's blood. In fact, Tomioka, the Hashira who lives tormented by his own weakness, constantly sabotages himself mentally. He believes he is to blame for the death of his friend Sabito. That's why I ask you, considering the encounter with Johnny Blaze in his Ghost Rider form, the spirit of vengeance, is it possible that Tomioka or some Hashira could have their mind completely destroyed by the spirit of vengeance? What will Ghost Rider change in the story of Demon Slayer? But the most interesting question is actually, how did Johnny Blaze, or rather Ghost Rider, end up in the Demon Slayer universe? Look, while chasing a demon that escaped from hell, Ghost Rider is pulled through a dimensional rift opened by supernatural forces. After falling into a dense forest with a sinister atmosphere, Ghost Rider with his hell cycle keeps moving forward, leaving flames wherever he goes in search of the demon. As he travels through the forest, he encounters several Onis. Johnny realizes that although these Onis are not demons from his own hell, they fit the criteria to be his targets. They kill innocents, destroy families, and live off human blood. Johnny, with his mystical chains and conjuring the flames of hell, burns the Onis completely, cutting off their necks and incinerating every cell of the Oni. Further ahead, Johnny finds Inosuke fighting against the Father Spider Demon. Johnny quickly cuts off the arm of the Father Spider Demon and wraps him in his demonic chains, burning him completely. And Inosuke is terrified by what he saw and stays alert to fight against the Ghost Rider. Suddenly, Tomioka arrives, who quickly launches a wave of attacks against Johnny. Fortunately for Johnny, Tomioka's attacks don't mean much since he can regenerate and keep up with his speed easily, even without his hellish motorcycle. Look, the Ghost Rider has already faced heroes and villains with insane speeds, like Thor, Hulk, and many other heroes and villains. Johnny quickly realizes that Tomioka and Inosuke fight for the same goal, to punish the guilty. And having the experience of already entering several alternate universes, Johnny recognizes the strength of the Oni hunters. He warns that he is fighting for the same cause. But in that world, the hunters are unaware of any friendly word or gesture coming from the Onis, and in this case, they are unaware of any friendly word or gesture coming from something or someone that looks like an Oni. Tomioka once again tries to attack the Ghost Rider. When faced with the attack from the water Hashira, he unleashes his penance stare, but as a warning, making Tomioka relive all the guilt he carries, reliving all his moments of greatest pain and suffering, not with the goal of destroying him, but with the goal of stopping him, so that he can move forward in his pursuit of the demon who escaped from hell. We should remember that Johnny has already used his penance stare in this way against some of the heroes of the Marvel Universe, precisely to keep them from crossing the line of justice. With his hell cycle, Johnny moves forward, reaching Tanjiro, and before being sliced by Rui's webs, he is saved by Johnny, who cuts them with his mystical chains and wraps Rui in his infernal flames, destroying him completely when Shinobu and Kanao arrive, and they stand before the Ghost Rider. Both attack him, but they can't keep up with him while he's riding his infernal motorcycle. Johnny once again uses the penance stare on Shinobu, which has a similar effect as it did on Tomioka, making her relive all her pain and trauma from losing her sister Kanai, not being strong enough to help her in battle against Upper Moon 2. But look, Kanao is not affected by the penance stare, precisely because she has no guilt, only carrying pain and suffering from her past. Therefore, Johnny binds her with his mystical chains, and he continues on his path in search of the demon that was loose in the Demon Slayer universe. When they return to the Demon Slayer core, a meeting is called to discuss Nezuko and the Ghost Rider, an entity that is beyond the knowledge of the core. Tomioka and Shinobu report on his powers, including the fact that he defeated the Onis. The hunters are left with the question: is the Ghost Rider an ally or an enemy? These questions will be answered soon, so stay until the end to find out whether he will join the Demon Slayer Corps or continue his journey alone in this story. On the Infinity Train, when Rengoku faces Akaza, Johnny Blaze makes his extravagant entrance, coming out from behind the train cars with his Hell Cycle. Rengoku immediately faces the Ghost Rider. He overtakes him and goes straight for Akaza, who dodges his blazing chains that tear through the air with supernatural cracks. Each strike from Akaza was blocked by Johnny's hellish chain. At the height of the fight, while Akaza faced the Ghost Rider, the penance stare struck the Oni, completely destroying his mind, annihilating his soul, making him feel all the pain for every death and pain he caused, both as a human and as an Oni. Akaza agonized as his mind was completely destroyed, and he was burned by the hellfire of the Ghost Rider. Trying to get answers for the core, Rengoku stays in a battle stance to face the Ghost Rider, who gets on his motorcycle and leaves, completely changing the original storyline of Demon Slayer. Now in the entertainment district, while the hunters were facing Daki and Gyutaro, detecting once again the presence of evil beings. While Uzui, Inosuke, and Zenitsu were on the ground, the Ghost Rider goes into action again. While Daki saw her brother mocking Tanjiro, Johnny caught her attention as he rode by, causing explosions and a loud noise with his Hell Cycle. Daki throws her sashes at the Spirit of Vengeance, who sets them on fire with Hellfire, destroying them instantly. And before Gyutaro can make a move against Johnny, he uses the penance stare on the Oni, who screams and disintegrates in a matter of seconds. The fight didn't even last more than a minute. In front of Tanjiro, Johnny faces the boy who asks what his goal is. Johnny simply says that his goal is to punish the guilty and save the Onis. Tanjiro has a conversation with Johnny, trying to recruit him for the Demon Slayer Corps, saying that the Hashiras would see value in Johnny just like Tomioka, Rengoku, and Uzui saw value in his sister Nezuko, and Oni. Johnny states that he prefers to work alone. However, in the search for the demon that escaped from hell, it would be much faster if he could get information from other people who fight daily, or rather nightly, against the Onis and travel all over Japan. Johnny accepts Tanjiro's proposal, but he decides to stay only by the side of the boy who has a pure soul, while he embarks with Tanjiro on his journey, fighting alongside the hunter against the Onis, the boy with the Hanafuda earrings. He would give him the information if the Corps spotted any demon in his world. In the Swordsmith village, something insane happens. While the Ghost Rider was making a full patrol around the village, Muzan's upper moons appear, and things unfold similarly to the original storyline. But this time, while Motaro fights against Gyoku, he can't awaken the Demon Slayer mark precisely because Tanjiro hasn't awakened it. After all, he wasn't able to meet the necessary conditions to awaken it during the fight against Gyotaro since the battle was interrupted by Johnny Blaze. So, will Mutiro be able to win the fight against Gyoku without awakening the Slayer mark? This time, Muzan, tired of the constant failures of his upper moons and aware of the being that surrounds them. He wouldn't just send Gyoku and Rantengo on the mission, he also sends Doma upper moon 2. That would be a huge problem for the Demon Slayers. When Doma makes his entrance with a cryokinetic explosion that freezes everything around him, his overwhelming presence is overshadowed by the spirit of vengeance who arrives on his motorcycle to confront him. Doma unleashes all his most powerful attacks against Johnny, who sets them ablaze with his hellfire. He completely melts all the ice created by Doma while riding his hell cycle, which sets everything on fire wherever it goes. Immune to blood demon arts cold due to his fiery nature, Johnny grabs Doma by the throat with a flaming chain and forces him to face the penance stare. Spiritual death is instantaneous, no need to cut off the head. While the demons feel Doma's presence fading away, many find themselves in terrible trouble until the arrival of the Ghost Rider, who frees him from Gyoku's water prison and destroys him, chaining the demon with his chains and burning him alive, heading towards Rantengo. Johnny arrives setting everything on fire and incinerating all of Zorakuten's wooden dragons, while Tanjiro hunts the original clone to decapitate it. At this point, Nezuko awakens to the sun, and Tanjiro finishes off Hantengu's original clone. This time, the Hashiras are present. Having their lives saved by the Ghost Rider, they recognize his value and take him to Ubuyashiki's mansion to integrate him into the fight against Muzan. After all, the king of the Onis for sure. He will come after Nezuko to become the perfect demon. After telling his story to Ubuyashiki's Hashiras, Johnny and the hunters wait for Muzan's arrival, who summons them to the Infinity Castle, and Ghost Rider's carnage finally begins. Riding his infernal motorcycle, he rides through the entire Infinity Castle, destroying the demons with hellfire, burning them until nothing is left. When he meets Kokushibo, the monstrous speed and the almost divine sword technique make Upper Moon 1 the greatest challenge faced by the spirit of vengeance, at least so far. Johnny withstands the slashes with his skeletal body, and he counterattacks with his mystical chains. In the end, the hellfire begins to consume Kokushibo's demonic cells, disintegrating even his sword. With the Oni in disbelief at the strength of the Ghost Rider, he faces his judgment for centuries as a human. And the Oni, when facing the penance stare, is judged. When Kagaku and Nakimi are defeated, only Muzan remains. An epic battle takes place. Muzan tries to use Johnny's body as a host, transforming his body into a giant mouth to absorb him, but the spirit of vengeance is much older and powerful, expelling Muzan from his body, burning half of the King of Demons' body. The Ghost Rider faces Muzan head-on without the help of the Hashiras. Muzan is witnessing a flame greater than the flames of Yorichi, the one who tormented him for centuries. When Johnny finally decides to end the battle, the penance stare is so devastating that Muzan relives every life he's destroyed, every family he's massacred, every child he's killed. Simultaneously, as a last resort, Muzan's body explodes, splitting into millions of pieces in an attempt to escape. But the hellfire summoned by the Ghost Rider purges every part, every piece, every cell of Muzan, exterminating him completely. Thanks to Johnny Blaze, or rather thanks to the spirit of vengeance, the Ghost Rider. The war against the Onis is finally over. All the Hashiras were saved thanks to the interventions of the spirit of vengeance. Even Nezuko was treated in time by Shinobu and Tamayo so that she could become human again. Since no hunter awakened the mark of the Oni hunters, everyone would live their lives in peace. In the end, the demon reappears, and Johnny chases him, chaining him up, and throws him into a portal back to hell, returning to his universe. So, Otaku, did you like this story? Which character deserves to appear in this segment? Check out this video I picked for you, I guarantee you'll like it. See you there, Otaku.